Of course you would say that, wouldn't you? Are you going as far as South Carolina? Your duffel bag suggests that you are.
A car swept around her Volvo and sped up the ramp, horn blaring. She took no notice, only kept her serene gaze fixed on Tim. Yes, ma'am. All the way to New York.
I'll take you to South Carolina, not far into that benighted state, but a little way, if you'll help me out a bit in return. One hand washes the other, if you see what I mean.
You scratch my back and I scratch yours, Tim said, grinning.
There will be no scratching of any kind, but you may get in.
Tim did so. Her name was Marjorie Kellerman, and she ran the Brunswick Library. She also belonged to something called the Southeastern Library Association, which, she said, had no money because
Trump and his cronies took it all back. They understand culture no more than a donkey understands algebra.
65 miles north, still in Georgia, she stopped at a poky little library in the town of Pooler. Tim unloaded the cartons of books and dollied them inside. He dollied another dozen or so cartons out to the Volvo. These, Marjorie Kellerman told him, were bound to the Yemassee Public Library, about 40 miles further north, across the South Carolina state line. But not long after passing Hardeeville, their progress came to a stop. Cars and trucks were stacked up in both lanes, and more quickly filled in behind them.
Oh, I hate it when this happens, Marjorie said. And it always seems to in South Carolina, where they're too cheap to widen the highway. There's been a wreck somewhere up ahead, and with only 2 lanes, nobody can get by. I'll be here half the day. Mr. Jameson, you may be excused from further duty. If I were you, I would exit my vehicle, walk back to the Hardeeville exit, and try your luck on Highway 17.
What about all those cartons of books?
Oh, I'll find another strong back to help me unload, she said, and smiled at him. To tell you the truth, I saw you standing there in the hot sun and just decided to live a little dangerously.
Well, if you're sure. The traffic clog was making him feel claustrophobic. The way he'd felt stuck halfway back in economy class of the Delta flight, in fact. If you're not, I'll hang in. It's not like I'm racing a deadline or anything.
I'm sure, she said. It's been a pleasure meeting you, Mr. Jameson.
Likewise, Ms. Kellerman.
Do you need monetary assistance? I can spare $10 if you do.
He was touched and surprised, not for the first time, by the ordinary kindness and generosity of ordinary folks, especially those without much to spare. America was still a good place, no matter how much some, including himself from time to time, might disagree. No, I'm fine. Thank you for the offer. He shook her hand, got out, and walked back along the I-95 breakdown lane to the Hardeeville exit. When a ride was not immediately forthcoming on US 17, he strolled a couple of miles to where it joined State Road 92. Here, a sign pointed toward the town of Dupre. By then it was late afternoon, and Tim decided he had better find a motel in which to spend the night. It would undoubtedly be another of the cheese dog variety, but the alternatives, sleeping outside and getting eaten alive by skeeters or in some farmer's barn, were even less appealing. And so he set out for Dupre. Great events turn on small hinges. 4. An hour later, he was sitting on a rock at the edge of the 2-lane, waiting for a seemingly endless freight train to cross the road. It was headed in the direction of Dupre at a stately 30 miles an hour. Boxcars, auto racks, most loaded with wrecks rather than new vehicles, tankers, flat cars, and gondolas loaded with God knew what evil substances that might, in the event of a derailment, catch the piney woods afire or afflict the Dupre populace with noxious or even fatal fumes. At last came an orange caboose where a man in bib overalls sat in a lawn chair, reading a paperback and smoking a cigarette. He looked up from his book and tipped Tim a wave. Tim tipped one right back.